1, so we're still in 10 minutes of your lunch. And then Nick Molden from Emissions Analytics will sum everything up. So if you want to stay there, Chris, I'll pass you. Can you look after those two and pass them around? Mats, if you come forward, and Marcus and Lewis, thanks. And thanks everybody for your attention today.
All right, so that was very encouraging. My reality maybe looks a little bit different, but we're all on different paths. But one thing that I want to pick up here in this panel, and I really like for you to engage now and ask the questions. I mean, it's like there is new technology, and we have seen wonderful technologies coming out here in a couple of days, and but that meets the market. Something needs to happen. And when reality is that there is a market and there is money that needs to happen. And one thing that we all know, and we all know it in the back of our heads, is that this market is not growing like tech companies. It's a steady one, and I think it was presented a couple of times. It's more or less stable. And in a stable market, and I go back to one thing I thought about. You remember Ericsson phones and Nokia phones? That came into a stable market. The technology was stable. They had a hard time making money. The customers, which was mainly companies, B2B, they were asking for a phone that had longer battery time and a keyboard for messaging. And then they got an Apple that had less battery time and no keyboard. And Nokia said, and Ericsson too, so, I mean, they went bankrupt after that. They said, it will never work. It's 5 times more expensive. And I think that is the reality now, that we have a mixture of new technologies. Maybe that's, I'm going to ask the panel. But the challenge now is that the business can transform. People are actually dying from our product in the market. And people are recognizing that, but now something needs to be done. Maybe we don't all recognize that we need to do something, but we have the technologies. So the question now is that with all these kind of technologies that you have seen over the last 2 days here, with this fragmented approach, do we think that is a strength, or we think that is a disadvantage? I'm going to start with you, Marcus. From your perspective, yeah. German market, big fleet, you're seeing all this technology coming towards you. Is that a strength, or is that a disadvantage for us?
I think it will become a headache because, to be honest, if we look at there are so many amazing technologies on the market now, but if we as a rental company want to include them, we have around 160 locations. So currently what we are doing is all of these 160 locations get a charging infrastructure because we get more and more electric devices. So additional costs, additional training, our mechanics need to be additionally skilled. So the same with HVO. Not every client wants to have HVO, so we have 2 different fueling stations. We send out the machine with HVO, they send it back with diesel, so what shall we do? We mix it, or is there somebody sucking it up? And so it's very difficult. And if you look at hydrogen, it's getting even more complicated. And also with our mechanics, they are already very skilled multitasking experts, because it's not only in the morning they get an excavator, later they have a scissor lift, they have different, so they have to be very, very skilled to maintain all the different kind of equipment. And now the engine is also changing. That makes it very, very difficult and more expensive, of course. So yeah, it's a huge challenge.
No, I tend to agree with that. I mean, if you look at the car market, it's one more or less, I mean, variants of one technology that went out in the market. And if you are like having different brands at home, you only have one charger and it fits all of them. And now we're saying that our industry, for one customer, has different technologies, and they're going to use that. So that's probably a challenge. And it's probably a challenge from a money perspective, because now we are taking all that money and then putting that into different technology and instead of one. And just one last thing with that. That 20-ton excavator that you talked about, that consumes 15% of all diesel that goes to the construction sector for machines. So it stands for 15% of the CO2. So that's one product. If we only multiply one product, but there is like thousands of products. So that's a good thing.
Mats, could I add just a little bit?
Yeah.
Just, you know, and apologies for giving you business 101, but rental companies, much like Marcus's, we run on utilization, right? It's the first thing that we look at when we wake up. We look at run rates, we look at utilization, and ultimately financial utilization. Now, depending on the company, there'll be a model, but if I just throw a number out at you and say 80% is a standard amount of utilization, you'll probably have at any point in time between 5 and 8% of your fleet in repair, and you'll have about 5 and 8% of your fleet in transit. So it's been off-hired, it's moving back to base, it's moving back. The remaining percentage is what's available, it's what's going through PDI. That's how businesses, that's our business model today. As soon as you do anything to impact that, it makes it very much more expensive. So fragmenting your fleet, if you've got an electric excavator and a diesel excavator, and you've just off-hired your diesel one, and the next customer who rings up wants an electric one, you've got one sat there, but you don't have an electric, that's a real challenge. So you've lost your customer and you've got underutilized assets. So we've got a model that, you know, we try not to fragment our fleet or silo our fleet. It gets very difficult when you've got variants of the same thing because you'll need more of them. The likelihood is they'll be less well utilized. And then I think Marcus's point around staff as well. You don't suddenly hire more staff because you've got a fragmented fleet. So you've got an electrical engineer who is also going to need to be able to do an oil change. And as soon as you've got that situation and that's not possible because of technical divergence, then you're going to need to hire someone extra. So your overhead's gone up, so your prices go up. And we've already said, you've mentioned about the difficulty in passing that cost on. It's very, very challenging. So yeah, I'm excited and I'm very nervous about having fragmented fleets.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, Chris has put it much more eloquently than I can. But it is, yeah, it is definitely a risk, absolutely, and it does threaten to increase costs. But it's also a reality. Yeah. So what is the alternative? If we say, right, okay, we want everything to be electric, then, so what happens when you can't use electric? You know, the reason we have all of these different technology options is because we have different customers with different requirements and different infrastructure. Yeah, the different use cases. So if we do say, right, there's only one approach we want to take, one technology, yes, it standardizes it, it means less fragmentation, but it also means that there's very few use cases for it. And in the other cases where it doesn't apply, where maybe hydrogen would have been better, you end up just carrying on using diesel.
I think you're absolutely right. So we're running out of time too, so I don't want to miss out to get any questions from you. Do you have any questions for any of us here? And go ahead. So we're
This way you have to ask them.
Well, it's a question to all of you, really. The last two talks of the session, what a time to be alive. Lewis, you made your feelings about our political leadership quite clear, but if I could perhaps just ask for maybe the three of you, the four of you, if you could have one policy recommendation or one policy request, what would it be?
That is the $1 million question that we are trying desperately to find an answer for. So I did mention we have starting to introduce something around generators, so diesel generators. So we are looking at a policy of power management planning, which could theoretically expand out into fuel management planning in the when you're going for your planning permission or client contract expectations. So, but it is, again, it comes back to the fragmented thing, where there are so many different technologies, so many different use cases. That what one policy can we introduce that will be workable? Even if you say, right, let's have a 20% reduction in diesel consumption by over the next 5 years. How do you measure that? What do you baseline it against? So you've got you're going to So, we think we're going to burn this much diesel, so we'll just reduce that by 20%. Yeah, everything is going to be really, really complicated, and coming up with one policy that is going to change things is going to be very difficult. So we are trying to focus on specific use cases, specific machine types in sensible areas, and trying to get the focus there to improve uptake for those lots of little steps instead of the one big policy giant leap, which we don't think is practical.
You just want some sunshine on your walk from the bus stop. I get it.
I quite like Lewis's answer, so I'll go there. But I think if I could have one or maybe two, I think at a macro level we need more business support in terms of funding or tax credits with regards to innovation. We get none at the moment. That scheme was only made possible by the fact that DESNZ were able to fund most of it. And from a public procurement perspective, they've made some steps with regards to environmental social governance and making it up to 10% or a minimum of 10% of a tender. I can win or lose a tender on price with 10% ESG. It's neither here nor there really. It's not changed the dial anywhere.
Maybe just to add, I think we have to begin a bit further. I think it would be very good if regulator or people who make regulations would be scientists and not teachers and lawyers. I think that's a big issue we have in the EU. If I have read the EU taxonomy, it took me hours to understand what is written inside. So I think maybe we should start there to make it more clear and what is really necessary to comply with, so not lawyer talk.
From my perspective, it's very clear. I mean, there are stage 5 regulations, and we've been very successful as an industry to implement those on the machines. And those on bigger machines is very effective. I mean, we could argue about the date that I showed yesterday, but it's going down on the bigger machines. I would like to see the same as stage 5 for all power bands within the regulations. And if we get that, then we can compete on equal terms with electrification or hydrogen or whatever it is. The technology is available, but it's not put to use in that smaller size class. So stage 5, one power band, so it's not 7.5 for certain engines and 0.5 for other engines. It should just be one, that I think. Any other questions? There's one. No? Can we
I'm Satya from Commercia. I'm really happy that I'm not in a panel, to be honest, because this is really the difficult moment of, especially for the OEM, and I really appreciate your honest comment from the plant hire perspective. My question is, so I've heard lots of pain point as a real, from the reality point of view, but if there is an OEM or if there is a solution coming to you saying the electric machine cheaper, and it will have a resale value somewhere else, maybe not in the UK, but maybe somewhere in Asia, and that the difficulty of charging can be solved by maybe like in-house, the original solution that you don't have to worry, or your customer don't have to worry about include for the charging. Then do you think that's going to be the moment you're going to start buying the electric vehicle?
Yes. If we look at electric machinery, for example, in Germany, there are not only people complaining about. We have a lot of people who say, okay, there's no noise, there's no, the vibration is less. We can work within the city. We can work within water preserved areas. So there are many also advantages for that. And if the price would be fine, I'm 100% sure our clients would use it because there are so many positive aspects. But as soon as you talk about money, all positive aspects are gone. So that would be really helpful.
Couldn't put it better. Yeah, I agree. I think if you remove some of those barriers to entry, then it'd be a no-brainer. I think the one aspect, again, and I referred to it in my presentation, would be the financiers. So again, you know, does private equity, do the big banks understand the value, or do they respect the promises that the manufacturers are making in terms of what those residuals will look like? You could solve that problem by offering guaranteed buybacks, by the way. But yeah, I don't see why there'd be any blocker thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, this is the turning the solutions into no-brainers is the goal, really. They're the solutions that are taking off now, like, you know, the solar hybrid equipment, battery packs. They're the ones that are taking off because they make sense. You know, the commercials work. So yeah, that is the holy grail, getting the alternative fuels to become the no-brainer option.
Very good. Any other questions? So we have one more there.
Just put my big girl pants on before I ask the question. So I've been, this is the first time I've ever been to one of these conventions, and I think, as everybody else has said, I'm absolutely blown away with the technology that's out there and that's coming to market. But I think at the moment there's still, particularly in the UK, we've still got a lot of diesel vehicles, plant that's out there. So I work for a company called CFCS, and we supply fuel conditioning additive. So we've done our own case studies and trials. We've proven to the best of our ability that it reduces fuel consumption by up to 20%. A big kickback that we get from customers when I'm now trying to sell that on is, well, is it approved by a manufacturer? I have tried and tried and tried, and I cannot get any feedback from a manufacturer to say, we'll try it, we'll test it. So I think my question is, what is your advice for us as a small company with a product that we feel works, can help make these tiny steps that you need, isn't going to cause your drivers any hassle, is readily available? How would you propose, how's the best way to get that to market so everybody gets those savings?
Maybe. Yeah. So I'm representing the manufacturer. So as a big manufacturer, we look at the mainstream of what is trending and what's coming up, and it needs to be the big things, because it's not cheap to do those tests that we need to do, and then we go for that. So that's number one, is that we look at the trends and then we make a decision of what we should bet on this time. And it's biofuels and those kinds of things coming up. But then another input is that if a large plant hire is using something new and coming to us and saying that is very good, we're going to say no first, of course. But after a while, we're gonna soften up when we hear the second big plant hire saying the same thing, that this is something you should look at. Because then it's like a customer demand, not from your side, but from the user side of it. That's normally how the process, or that's how the process is done. I don't know if you guys add to that.
I can explain the journey that we had with HVO, which was 5-6 years ago. When HVO was first started being used in the UK, there was no certification, and it took some manufacturers longer than others to certify. But it became a commercial argument for us. So we had a customer that was insistent they wanted to use the product, so we shared the risk with the provider of HVO at the time. It's our asset, we can do what we like. So I think you need to bring some customer demand. I think you need to inspire the hire companies that want to then lobby their OEMs. But the decision rests with the asset owner in the first instance. It would be nice if it was certified, because it certainly makes warranty claims and onward selling very important. And like I said, the depreciated asset value is critical to us. So if we've devalued the asset because we're now out of warranty, does your company want to take that risk, hypothetically? That is a rhetorical question, but there you go. So actually, you could probably strike a commercial arrangement quite quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think if I understood the question correctly, as a rental company, I see ourselves as we are the rental business is getting more and more important, in my opinion, because we are also putting like circular economy aspects into the market. We are here that clients like big construction companies, also smaller companies, they can try something out. They don't need to invest a lot. They can rent it, test it, like it or not. So we are like the enabler for new technologies, in my opinion. So I would say it would be good that OEMs and rental companies are working closer together if they want to introduce new technologies into the market, because we have amazing salespeople who can pitch all new technologies. If the price is correct, if the technology makes sense, there are a lot of good opportunities that we can open the market for all these new technologies, in my opinion. So so I would say pilot projects, that's the same what we have done with the zero emission construction side with Wacker Neuson, because they came and said, hey, nobody wants to have our electric excavators, what shall we do? A bit more, it was not that dramatic, of course. But we said, okay, try and error. People have to test it, they have to feel it, they have to see that, okay, there's no black smoke coming out, but it's still working perfectly, and I have less vibration, so why should I not use it?
Very good. Then we wrap it up there. Thank you very much for the panel. Thank you.
Great. Matt, thank you very much indeed. Thanks to everyone on the panel. And that brings us to a close. I normally like to try and run to time, but I was feeling the pain in the room from those presentations in a good way, in as much as pain can be good. That's the reality on the ground. What I take away from the last 2 days is it's not a dissimilar situation from I'm seeing lots of other different sectors within the economy. Of tension that is developing and that we're all living. Clearly from the presentation, there's a huge number of things, incredibly impressive things that are technologically possible to deliver jobs being done with lower and lower fuel consumption to meet ever and ever stricter environmental regulations. So there's huge technological progress. So then why, when we talk to the operators and hear from them this morning, are they facing so many headwinds? There's a tension, there's a paradox there. And why is that? And I think fundamentally what it comes down to is that the questions that are being set, the environmental questions that are being set for us, are the wrong ones, ultimately. For me, my view is that this all ultimately about how we can do real jobs, get things done in the real world, to make society better, to earn money, to bring up our families, whatever it is, to do those real jobs most effectively, most cost efficiently. That it has to be real, related to real things. When actually so many of the environmental questions we're putting is, how can we employ favoured technology X in the widest way? And there's someone there telling us what favoured technology X should be. And if they've got it wrong, that then sets up the problem. Or if the world is not as simple as that, if there's a much more complex set of things that these wise politicians don't know about, and actually you do know about on the ground. What can we do about it? Well, we can't just miraculously, by thinking about it, create a healthy second-hand market for hydrogen ICE excavators. It's not through lack of willing or creativity. It's just it has to be an economic reality. So what I think the only thing ultimately that can be done is we have to move to a different view of environmental policy. And I know that that sounds in a very big picture, but ultimately that's where everything stems from. And we need to move it to a much more practically oriented, not the, what is, frankly, a very, very deeply embedded monocular vision of a climate consensus that we have. And I don't believe that anyone in the room here will deny the science about the environment and climate change. But that doesn't mean that the current solution that's embedded in the top level of politics is leading to practical solutions. So we need to move our politicians to a better place which is much more practically informed. And how do we do that? I think it's incumbent upon everyone in the room here essentially to speak out whenever we can about the reality of, what we're trying to achieve, what is possible technologically, that we can deliver massive emissions reduction. But this is how it really works on the ground, because it's about real people trying to achieve real things. And it's that last bit that so often gets lost in the corridors of power, and they live in abstract